Welcome back. Listen Up is continuing its story on the man with the plan to find and rescue the Chilean miners. He calls the miners' rescue a miracle and says it was God, not technology, that brought them to the surface.
We thought we were finished. Okay, they had been found, they were all alive, they were all healthy, they were getting food, water. Okay, we're finished. So we packed up and left.
But emotionally, Greg hadn't left the site. Days ticked on, and although the miners had been found, there was still no plan in place to bring the trapped miners to the surface.
The Chilean office was contacted by the government and said, have you guys got any suggestions? Because again, we supply all the drillers around there, and they kept on saying, well, if anybody knows, it'd be driller supplies. So I sat down really here at this desk. It really was not that hard to do because I decided, okay, I'm gonna try to figure out what resources that we have in the country. And if they're not in the country, what resources can I draw from anywhere else in the world quickly?
Greg was back in.
From the geology that we had, we knew that we were going to be coming very close to some old mine shafts. When I say close, I'm talking about as close as 3 feet. And I was deathly afraid that that drilling hammer was going to cause either a cave-in and kill the miners or cause the wall to explode as we passed by one of those shafts, and we were going to lose the hole as well. And it was about that time that I received a phone call from a mutual acquaintance of mine who said, Greg, there's a guy in Pennsylvania that was involved in the Q Creek mine rescue of 2002, and he thinks he's got some technology that'll work well there, but he can't get anybody to talk to him. No one will listen to him. I called the guy immediately, and there's a guy named Brandon Fisher with Cinerock. And I said, Brandon, I said, what do you got? And he explained his tool. I joke about it. You see all those shows where you have the heavenly choir go, ah. And what I saw his equipment was like, oh man, this is exactly what I need. So I called him back. I said, this looks really good. What do you want to do? And
initially, Greg's plan was for search, possibly for body recovery. Now, it was for rescue.
So I had to have my 24-year-old sales manager, and I had to tell him, man, this is a plan. You're going to go in there to the top government officials, and you've got to give them this plan. So he walked in and laid out my plan, and about 80% of the people laughed because, I said we could do it in 6 weeks. And everybody else, again, was talking about 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And a lot of the experts were like, you got to be crazy. You can do this in 6 weeks? And he said, that's what Mr. Greg said, 6 weeks. So Andres Sugaret, who was in charge of the operation, said, all right, let's go, and called it Plan B. That was his name for it, not mine. He called it Plan B, and so at that time we mobilized.
At what point did you start to have real hope that you could bring these guys to the surface?
That's a good question, and my answer you may not understand. I never thought about it because, again, the job was so technical, and we had so many problems. As I had mentioned to you before, we had these big turns we had to go through. Just for an example, on 575, meter 575, we got stuck. When you're drilling, there's only 2 ways to go. You can go up or you can go down. We tried both, neither one worked. We were totally stuck. And it was very frustrating to us because we were only about 60 meters from the miners. They could see our tools. Then they were asking us, hey, why have you stopped?
Was giving up an option?
No, it wasn't. And that's when I say that at that point in time, that's when I say that God drilled the hole, not me, because we were out of technological answers. And I started to pray. And actually, Brandon Fisher's wife had come out to the job site, and I found out later that she was praying as well. And we slowly started to get some wiggle room and move. But I never thought about when we were going to save them because that hole fought us to the last meter. We were about 1.5 meters to 2 meters to be finished, and we got stuck. We got hung up on one of the bolts, and it stopped us. It stuck us. And a bunch of the people that were political started clapping and cheering, thinking we were finished. And we weren't finished. And again, had we got stuck, we were finished forever. And we managed to get going again on that. And then we had an explosion, a very loud explosion come from the side of the rig. To this day, we don't know what it was. But I thought it was the air hose. And had the air hose gone, we would have lost the hole again. And I'm talking about almost there. We actually got so spooked, we were within 9 inches of finishing, and we called down to the miners because they had some tooling down there. And we said, is there any way you guys can just chip out the rest of that 9 inches? Because we were really afraid we were going to get stuck. And if we got stuck, we lost everything.
When did you start to breathe again?
I started to breathe after we pulled the tooling out, because the tooling took about 8 or 9 hours to come out. Still wasn't breathing too well. Then we sent a video camera down to look at the hole, and it was beautiful. It looked like a gun barrel. The rock was so hard, you could actually see some of the rotations of the bit. And that's when I said, you know what, that cage is just going to flow right up and down there, no problem whatsoever. They need to case off about the last 60 meters, and that's it. So I felt good about that, and we had a meeting, and we decided that we were not going to stay on job site, because, you know, those guys had been down there 69 days. We had been talking to them, you know, constantly. They needed to be with their family. We were going to be in the way. So we decided to leave and let the professionals do their job, because our job was finished. As I was leaving, the owner of Plan A came up to me and he said, Greg, he said, you know, he said, you couldn't drill that hole. And I said, yeah, what do you mean? You know, Raul, he said, God had to drill that hole. So really that was his, he said, God had to drill that hole. There's no way you could do that. And I said, I think you're right. I said, I think you're right.
Why did you think he was right?
Because I know technologically what we could do. And I know that what we asked of our drill pipe, for example, was impossible, that it had to break. But I think God's hand was on that, and I truly believe that. And as I told somebody, God drilled the hole, I just had a great seed.
And what should have taken 6 weeks took just 33 days. 33 days to drill the capsule hole that would see 33 men reunite with their loved ones.
You know, somebody asked me one time, and it was a good question, they said, how did this job strengthen my faith? And I thought about that. I said, you know, it's funny, my faith strengthened the job, because again, there were times when all human, as far as I'm concerned, efforts were futile, and I resorted to prayer. This sounds strange, and I would have probably thought it was strange to say beforehand, but I could feel the prayers of the faithful lifting us up. We went, you know, very little sleep, very little food, really tough conditions. I mean, I'm 50 years old, and I was able to do, I think, a lot more than I would have thought possible. Now, sure, part of it is because I was focused, but I firmly believe it was that faith that I had, that I knew God was sovereign and God was there, and I knew God had a plan. And it really helped me keep on going in the darkest times.
When we return, trapped for more than 2 months, the world watched in anticipation as over 1,500 journalists from 39 countries covered the miner's story.